Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking with Frank Portinari, the podcast that gains access to real and inspiring people. Before I introduce today's guest, Darren Barden, I'd just like to make a few announcements. Firstly, I'd like to welcome my new team member, Gary, or as we fondly call him, Gary the Hat, and Gary is the owner of Gary the Hat Media. I'd like to thank all those who've subscribed to the podcast, all the likes, all the comments we've had. It's very much appreciated. We will be bringing more exciting guests in the future. If you have any suggestions of your own, we're quite prepared to listen to those suggestions. I'd also like to mention the fact that today's podcast is dedicated to a very worthy cause. It's basically called Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife. And I'd like to give some acknowledgement to Ben Span and all his fantastic team who are doing so much good throughout the country. There is a specific event, a charitable event that's coming up, which is going to take place, I believe, on the 21st of August at the Rico Arena in Coventry. And that's going to be a boxing tournament. And there's some real faces at that tournament and also within the audience as well. I'd also like to say, if anybody else has got any charitable events coming up, if you please allow us the time to advertise it, we'll gladly do that. That's not a problem for us. We want to help people as much as we can. So let's get down to business and let me introduce today's guest. I'd like to thank Darren for coming along today. Let me give you a little bit of background on Darren. Darren was the victim of a brutal knife attack. He's also a best-selling author and he's an inspirational speaker. And I'm also going to ask him to talk about another project that he's currently undertaking. I'm sure he'll do that for us. So, Darren, welcome to Frankly Speaking. It's really good, mate. I've been trying to get you on for a while, but it's lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me, Frank. And thank you for mentioning the knife campaign as well. It's absolutely vital to what we do with everything, you know. So, thank you.
Yeah. I'd also like to mention while I'm at it, and I will mention it again probably during the course of the conversation, I mentioned that Darren is a best-selling author, and this is the book, and it's called Let's Skip to the Good Bits, which, considering there's some bad bits in it, I thought that was quite a good title, Darren. quite ironic. So, Darren...
So, I was going to say it's quite funny where the title comes from, actually. But
right, okay. If you want to explain that at a later stage when you mention the book again, if you want to, you're more welcome. So, Darren, let's go back to your roots a little bit. Where did you grow up?
So, I was born in Harlow in Essex, in the Staple-Tie area. My kids feel, you know, we've sort of moved on a bit from those areas. So it was just a council estate with mum. My dad was a lorry driver. My mum was a cook in a school. Eventually, she ended up being a cook in Westminster Abbey School, actually, which was quite an honour for her. Yeah, but just humble background. You know, my dad was working week to week to pay the bills. Had holiday where we could, normally in the back of a van that he'd borrowed from work because he'd been a lorry driver. But that was our growing up. Yeah, so that was our growing up. Nothing elaborate, but they made sure we never went without.
Yeah, brilliant. What was your schooling like, Darren? Was you academic?
No, never academic, mate. I mean, I don't even know how I wrote a book, to be honest. That's an achievement in itself. But no, I went to Steward School over Staple-Tie. You know, I enjoyed school. I actually enjoyed school. Bunked off too much, as we did back then. It was a bit silly, really, because my mum was a cook in one of the schools, so she always got to find out. And 9 times out of 10, I got caught. But it didn't stop me. But no, it was just a normal childhood, like, you know, we had lots of friends, always playing out, you know, mostly football for me. I was never into things like cricket and anything else. It was football and football only for me. So
I've got to ask this now, I suppose, because you bloody mentioned it, didn't you?
Yeah.
Go on. Because I know Arlo, as far as I was concerned, was quite a lot of Tottenham supporters there, but you're going to ruin that, aren't you? Go on.
Yeah, I'm going to ruin that, yeah, because, I mean, pretty much all my mates, all Tottenham fans, me being a Chelsea fan. So I've had a good weekend.
Oh, I'm sure you have, Darren. I'm sure you have.
So, and I was fortunate enough, I was a bit of a super sub for Glenolder Sports many, many years ago.
Right.
So I was just telling Gary earlier that on one particular Sunday we was there and we had Chris Waddle and Glenn Oddle as our Sunday League managers because I didn't achieve much in Sunday League football and I certainly weren't good enough for them, but that was a highlight of one of my Sunday League career.
Right. Well, I suppose we better give our mutual friend a mention, Jimmy Miller, eh?
Yes, yeah. Hello, Jimmy. But to be fair, I started where he actually drinks. That's where I started on Saturday before the cup final. So
was it?
Had a few in there. Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
You'll have to get yourself over one day.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice. No, I appreciate that. So when you left school, how old was you when you left school then?
I would have thought 15, 16, something like that. I was already working. I was working as on a mobile fruit and veg round, going around the houses selling fruit and veg for a guy, which, I was earning, it was good money for me then. I was earning £7.50 as a paper boy. Yeah. And then I went on to earning 30 odd quid a week doing fruit and veg. It was a big old jump for me. But I needed to get a career. And I started life out as an apprentice sign writer. So with an actual brush and done a city in guilds. Didn't quite finish the city in guilds. But yeah, I spent many years doing that for a particular company called Stone Signs in Harlow. Yeah. Where I grew up basically doing that job, went from being a boy to a man, if you like.
I often wonder how they do that. You've been out with a drink the night before, we've had a big session and you've got to come in the next day. You've got to keep a steady hand.
And we were having sessions most nights back then, I can tell you. There was a few shaky lines.
You obviously perfected it, Darren, didn't you?
Yeah. Obviously perfected it. That was that stick you used to rest on, it was an important tool, that was, I can tell you.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Probably the most important one. No, it's good for me. I learned a lot. I was always fairly handy with tools. So I went from doing the sign writing, I went into making the signs and installing them. So I was working with wood, metal, perspex, you name it. I was digging holes, climbing ladders, building scaffold towers. So you sort of became a bit of a jack of all trades during that spell, which has stood me in good stead forever, since then.
Basically the complete opposite of me, Darren, because I've got the ideas up here, mate. But I always say to the wife, there's a blockage somewhere when it comes down to the end,
Well, I'm rebuilding my house. This house I bought now.
Great interior designer, but that's it. I'll leave it to the craftsman. Definitely not me. That's for sure.
No, maybe drop the paint. Enjoy a bit of that.
Drop the paint on the walls, maybe. That's probably about it. So when did this dark period come into your life, then, Darren? That horrible night.
Well, to be fair, I was working at Stone Signs doing my job in the mornings, 8:30 till 5:30. But I used to do a night job as well. So because we was always skiing. We had a little baby at the time, so I was delivering newspapers to shops. So I'd go to work. We'd be sort of Sunday through to Thursday. You go to work at 2 in the morning. You're only doing 2 or 3 hours a night. Come back, get a few hours sleep, and then get to work like normal. And then Friday and Saturdays, you'd start at midnight because of the extra papers, and you might do 5 or 6 hours, maybe even 7 hours. So it was 7 days a week. And just every now and then you had to take a few days off because otherwise it'd kill you,
Yeah, of course.
But on the particular night, I'd gone to bed at 7 o'clock. My son, who was 1 year old at the time, he was teething, and obviously because I needed my sleep, my wife was always trying to get him into another room so I could sleep, and so she was in another room tending to him. And at midnight on a Monday night, there was a knock at the door. So we didn't have mobile phones then, Frank, so it was, if one of us were late for work, we'd go round, knock on the door, we'd phone them up on the landline. So getting a knock on the door wasn't such a shock at midnight on a Monday night. I know it would sound like that to most people, but for us, it could have, I just thought I overslept. So I sort of quickly jumped out of bed, ran downstairs, and as I got to my door, opened my door, there was 2 guys just stood there. And as I looked out, the one to my right as I looked, he looked to his right up the alleyway out in front of my house, and he just nodded, and that's it. He just nodded. They never said anything. and they just sort of surged forward. So I can remember putting my hands up in front of me in defence, and just that was it. I could just feel my head being bad, and at some point I went from a standing position to sort of like sitting on the floor in a bit of a fetal position. I don't know if I was knocked out or just don't remember. I couldn't tell you which it was, but as I started to sort of come around a little bit, I could just feel my head being battered from side to side, bang, bang, bang. It's just, and that's all I could feel was my head really taking a bit of a pounding.
Yeah.
So, and then all of a sudden, then it just stopped. It literally just stopped. The two guys just walked off. To my knowledge, I didn't see them run. They didn't say a word, didn't speak. They just turned around and walked. And I've never remembered. I shut my front door, but I don't know if I've done it with my hands, my feet. I couldn't tell you. You know, I mean, I was screaming police, help, all that sort of stuff. I just didn't know what was going on, you know. So, and I've never really been a fighter or anything like that, you know, so I probably couldn't even give a good account of myself in the situation. But so at that point, I then crawled through my hallway was only about 2 yards long, so I went through the hallway.
Can I just sit her up down a minute? And if I remember rightly from the book, you weren't even really dressed, were you?
No, I was in my pants, and it's really funny because my cousin always used to take the mickey out of me because I used to wear the old Speedo-looking pants, and he said, that's why you got stabbed, because you should have had some man shorts on. But yeah, so we, you know, I sort of crawled through, so I'm just in my underpants, crawled through the hallway, through my living room, and made it to the phone, which was the other end of the living room. It wasn't a particularly big living room, but still, and I couldn't tell you how long that took me, you know, whether it was 10 seconds, 2 minutes, I wouldn't know. Got to the phone, dialed 999 and just started screaming for help, you know, police, fire, ambulance, anything. Because obviously I haven't got a clue what's going on. At this point, I don't know what day of the week it is, you know, and there's just blood pumping out of me everywhere. And I'm just screaming for help down the phone. And to be fair, whoever the 999 receiver was, she was brilliant. You know, she settled me down on the phone because obviously she needs information.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
So the big focus for me now, not so much then, I didn't care about anybody at the time. Like the big focus for me now is what Wendy was listening to, holding a 1-year-old's arm, you know, in her arms upstairs.
Yeah.
You know, hearing what she thought at the time was some nutcase knocked on the door screaming at me. She didn't realise it was me that's doing the screaming.
Yeah.
So, but there was an eyewitness who we don't know whether my call went in at 3 minutes past midnight or the eyewitness 3 minutes, and there was a second call at 6 minutes past midnight. But the guy was out walking his dog. He heard all the screams. He walked his dog back and went to a call box. Like I said, we didn't have mobile phones then. And he dialed 999 as well. But at this point, I'm now like sitting by the phone. I put the phone down to the operator and I'm just sitting there basically bleeding to death, like, you know. So he's what, you know, I took 20 odd stab wounds, 7 serious wounds to my skull, my legs, my back, my chest, you know, one across my chest here was they take a Stanley knife and they put 2 blades in it and they separate the blades with a match.
Yeah.
So when it cuts you, it can't be stitched up.
Yeah.
So, you know, but lucky enough with that one, it went right across my chest, but it just scratched the surface. It didn't actually go in, but they broke the blade off in just under me tip bit there. They just broke the end of the blade off, the Stanley blade.
Yeah.
But the one in my back, you could have put your whole hand in that opening. It went really deep, you know. So they had to stitch inside first before they could stitch outside because it just wouldn't hold together, like, you know. But yeah, so I mean, at this point, I'm just sitting there bleeding to death. My wife then come downstairs holding me baby son George.
Yeah. Just
as she's walking towards me, well, we can imagine, like, she's now walking through my blood, not having a clue, you know, barefooted. You know, it's midnight on a Monday night. So she's sort of walking towards me just in shock, you know, and just looking at me basically. But where I had the blood just pouring out of me, she went straight past me, straight into the kitchen and got a tea towel. But basically, as soon as I touched myself with a tea towel, it was just soaked in red. You know, so I just sat there basically, you know, pouring of blood, and she then sat down opposite me on a settee, and I was sitting on the floor. And we just waited for the police to turn up. And I don't know how long anything took, you know, so I can't get the times right. But basically what happened then was there was some banging on the door. And people calling our name. It turned out it was one of my neighbours. A couple of neighbours had come out to check. Yeah. Wendy didn't know who they were. She just screamed back at them like, go away, leave us alone type thing. And then at some point the police turned up, and they were banging on the door as well, saying police. But Wendy didn't want to let them in because she didn't know if it was the police. Didn't know if someone's coming back. So eventually they convinced her that she was the police. They were the police, and they just come in, and then it was just mayhem. The house was mayhem. There were police running everywhere. I'm just sat there on the floor, bleeding to death. Like, no one came to tend to me whatsoever. There was a couple of funny moments. I was freezing, Frank. I've got to tell you this. I've never been this cold before or since that day. It was completely different temperature I felt than I've ever felt in my life. It was freezing. And Wendy was just like, she ran upstairs. The police said, look, get him a quilt. And she actually ran upstairs, and she went to grab the quilt off our bed. And she thought, he ain't having that one. That's our best quilt. So strange things in strange times, So she grabbed the spare quilt out of the cupboard and come down to me. But the police were running around like lunatics. They just kept saying to me, Darren, who do you know drives a red car? Darren. And every time they speak to you, it's like they say your name. They're just keeping me going, all the time.
Yeah.
It's Darren, who drives a red car? Darren, who do you know? What do you see the red car? And it was this Darren, this red car, Darren, red car. And I didn't have a clue. I didn't see any cars, but the eyewitness has seen them drive away in a red car. So anyway, they were just flying around everywhere. Prior to the police getting to me, for some reason, I decided to phone my mum and dad. One of my biggest regrets out of all of this, it's probably my biggest regret I had, because it weren't fair on my mum and dad. But I picked the phone up, the operator was still there, and she said to me, I said, look, I want to phone my dad. And she said, well, you need to put the phone down, count to 10, and then dial the number you want. Now, you've got to imagine at this point, I ain't got a clue what's going on. So how the hell I put the phone down, counted to 10, and dialed the number? Bearing in mind, I'm talking on a phone that you used to have to press the dials on as well, so, or the digits. And yes, I phoned my dad, and I said, look, Dad, can you come round? I've been beat up. So him and my mum just shot round, and they got there before the ambulance. By the time they got there, the police had blue and white tape all outside. And one copper said to me, Mum, look, we've done all we can for him. Well, to a mum, that
sounds a bit fatal, doesn't it?
Yeah. So she was like, well, an army of coppers wouldn't have stopped her coming in, So they then come inside. My mum and dad come in, but they couldn't let them into the living room where I was. Yeah. In case I died, basically, it was evidence everywhere, all the blood, everything there. So they ushered me mum and dad upstairs, but unfortunately for them, they got a good look at me sitting there, just in your pants, bleeding to death, So, and that's what they've had to live with forever. That's the sort of the hard part for them. They've seen that. I didn't get to see it. It was me. So in some cases, it's probably a worse experience for them than me, because I was living it, not witnessing it.
Do you think, Darren, maybe that was part of the shock process, that you felt compelled to phone in? I mean, maybe did you even think you were going to survive? I don't know.
To be honest, I didn't even know I'd been stabbed at this point. So, right. I mean, me and my dad, even to this day, are best mates. He was my best man at my wedding. We've been good mates. So I think it felt probably like a natural reaction to phone. If ever I've had any bother as a kid, it was always my dad I turned to. So it was, I suppose it just was habit more than anything. If I'd have been thinking straight, I'd have never have done it. I'd never have ever done it, because that's the one thing they have to live with every day. And it's not nice. It's not fair for them, So, probably nowadays someone would have bloody filmed me or taken photographs, you know what I mean? But it didn't happen to me, Yeah, So anyway, they were ushered upstairs with Wendy and my son George. And then eventually the ambulance people turned up. I don't know how busy they could be on a Monday night, but they took their time. So, but eventually they got there. The two ambulance men came in, the crew. They were brilliant. But all the time where I was sitting, where I'd made the phone call, and you've got to imagine, I've got blood just pouring out of me everywhere. At one point when Wendy was sitting, I know I keep going backwards and forwards in the story, but it's always hard to remember it. So, at one point, Wendy's sitting on the settee with George on her lap, and bearing in mind he's 1 year old, and I'm doing this to try and keep the blood from going in the eyes. Well, he thought I was playing peekaboo. So he's doing this, going boo like this, like, you know what I mean? So and here I am trying to keep the blood out of your eyes, you know? So, yeah, it was tough. But then it was just all the ambulance guys turned up. They then come in. They were starting to sort of get me ready. But where I'd been sitting, I was looking at the bottom of my stairs, which was near my front door. And there was this, what I thought was a small cricket bat, like a kid's cricket bat, just sort of at the bottom of the stairs. And so I just thought I'd been beat up. I didn't realise, even to this moment, I'd been stabbed. And it weren't until they put me on this metal frame chair, wrapped me up, strapped me in. And as they were carrying me out, as I got to the stairs, I realised it was an 18-inch meat cleaver. I didn't know this at the time. I found out details after, but it was a knife in a cardboard and cling film holster, so which hadn't been used on me, fortunately enough.
Yeah.
So they must have dropped it and left it behind. It was at that point I then went into meltdown because I realised I'd been stabbed, like, you know. So I'm there. Are we all right swearing on this channel then, Frank?
You can, mate. It's your platform. You do whatever you like.
So we're there, and all of a sudden I've been stabbed. I've been fucking stabbed. I was starting to just going to. I think reality kicked in, like, you know. So and as they sort of wheeled me out, so there's a couple of little moments here. Like, I've seen what now I know was a knife, and made me realise, you know, I've been stabbed. And as they wheeled me out, it was the 7th of October. So as it was a nice clear winter's night, but going from the front of my house to the back of the ambulance, I could just remember it was just which is the front cover of the book was designed by my son. It was an incredible blue, beautiful sky. It was clear, crisp blue with all the stars. And it was that point, in my eyes, I was a goner. That was my last little moment. I died, like, you know. So fortunately for me, I didn't. And as they put me in the back of the ambulance, I then realised, hang on, I've survived this, you know. And I went back to silly sod mode and was joking with the ambulance crew. And I don't remember any of it. This is what my wife told me and the policewoman after who sat with us. Apparently I was saying to the policewoman, look, come and sit on my lap. I said, like, things like this. I didn't have a clue, like, you know. So, and then the ambulance men, I wanted to know, because I'd never been into an ambulance before. You know, I wanted to know that, you know, where the lights and the sirens going, because I couldn't see or hear anything. And in the end, apparently I got on the ambulance driver's nerves so much, he said, just tell him we've gone for a red light, see if that keeps him quiet, you know. So, but yeah, so it was that moment then, get to the hospital, and it's a massive amount I don't remember. I don't know if I was unconscious, I couldn't tell you. There's bits I remember, but there's a large part I don't remember getting sort of from the back door of the ambulance actually into the hospital and things like that. So where they were stitching me up, and, you know, there's 20 odd wounds in total, what they could count. So, and I had 7 serious stab wounds to my skull. But what the hospital said was, you know, I had 3 different blades used on me. So that means one of the guys that done me had a blade in each hand. So he had no intentions of beating me up at all. Like, he was going through the 2 knives, like, you know. So, you know, and it was a bad night. You know what I mean? I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. You know, it was a bad experience. But, you know, moving on from there, everything I learned from that day forward has then helped me to where I am now. You know, so just being in the hospital, being stitched up, you know, and the nurse just saying, look, we're going to stop counting the stitches. They stopped counting at 40. Because, you know, they're trying to concentrate on stitching you, you know. And when they come to stitch up my skull, they were injecting me with this, like, it's meant to numb the area, but it was so painful when they was injecting me. In the end, I just said, look, can you just stitch and forget the injections? Because it was more painful than the stitches. So, which is what they then done. I can remember my head being over like a trough, like it felt like a gent's toilet with an old stainless steel trough. But they kept showering me head because they just kept finding wounds in my skull, you know. And obviously, back then I had longer hair, but, you know, and so they had to keep showering me head to see where the blood was coming from, so because it was just so much blood coming out all the time. But it was a funny moment again, and like I said, I do like to focus on the funny moments with this stuff because it keeps me going. But the ambulance crew, when they turned up to the house, there was a massive gash down the front of my shin, on my left shin, from my left knee down towards my ankle, right down the front of my shin. And they just took one look at it and they just bandaged it all up. they just bandaged this thing up. So when I got to the hospital, because there was so much bandage around it, the hospital there thought that was a major injury. So they undone all the bandages, got a wipe, and they wiped it. But basically, it was just a drop of blood that had dripped on my leg. There was no wound at all in the front of the leg, like, you know. So hopefully the hospital gave the ambulance folks a bit of stick about that. Yeah, and it's from there.
Well, I had a similar thing, Darren, when I'd been in a car crash, and I'd got taken by the breakdown fella to the hospital, and when I went into the washroom, I had all blood on my forehead.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got a major cut on the forehead. You know, I'll get loads of sympathy off the wife when I get home and whatever. And all it was a bit of glass from the windscreen had gone into my finger. And every time I went like that, I just kept smearing the blood.
Yeah. So there's nothing there at all.
Once I washed my head, exactly, it wasn't a cut, just a pathetic little bit of glass in my knuckle, like, you know. How long was you in the hospital for, Darren?
Oh, not long at all, mate. Once they stitched me up, there was I didn't have to have a blood transfusion or nothing like that. I think, like I say, I got there shortly before 1 o'clock, and I was out by 2 o'clock that afternoon on the Monday.
Right.
There was loads happened in the hospital, and it was big news. Like, at one point, I was in a room, and I had an armed guard with me, because by this point, the police had decided there was something naughty about me and what had happened. So they had an armed guard with me, and all of a sudden, I was just surrounded by police and doctors, and they basically dragged me off of one bed, put me on another bed, and whisked me off. Mm-hmm. And apparently, someone had seen someone wandering around in the dark in the hospital grounds. It turned out to be one of the local patients. Who was, you know, just a bit lost out there, and but they didn't know. They didn't know who it was, whether it's someone coming back to get me, you know. So I had a few issues when I was in there. I don't know whether one of my pupils got big or small, whichever it was, and I had a bit of blood dropping on the back of the eyeball, but they're not sure if it went in my eyes and round or was coming from one of the wounds at the time. So there was a few, you know, serious moments, but I just really weren't aware of everything. You know, it's a lot to take on board, you know. So I remember they put me in a ward with 5 old girls, which was brilliant, you know, because they thought I'm out of the way there. I stuck me in the corner. There was no windows, and all of a sudden a guy turned up with a metal. Remember the old camera boxes, the metal ones, stainless steel looking ones.
Yeah.
This guy turns up, and I see him talking to the nurse on the reception area, and pointing at me. And then saying something like he'd come to change the photocopier toner or something like that. She was like, "We haven't got a photocopier." And he was like, "Yeah." He just worked at the hospital, and he just wanted to be nosy, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
Then I had a little moment with a guy called Jim Reeves, who he was a porter at the hospital, but he came into the room. He spoke to this nurse at the reception area and pointed at me, and then started to walk towards me. And this guy had an immaculate boiler suit on, and he had polished shoes, right? And I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking, this ain't right. And as he got closer to me, I see on his badge, he said Jim Reeves, and I thought the old wartime singer.
The singer, yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, this guy's a professional hitman. He's come to finish me off, you know. So as he got near my bed, I sort of flung myself off the other side. With that, he turned and went, but he was just being nosy. He worked at the hospital, and my mum knew him from years later because she worked there as well sometime.
Right.
And he, like she said, he was always one of those. We look back on it as a funny moment, but at the time it was a bit of a scary moment, you know.
How did it feel going home, Darren? Did you feel vulnerable at home?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So
I imagine you did, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, we basically. I went to my mum and dad's that afternoon, and people were coming in and coming out, you know, coming to see us. And I don't remember everyone that came round. I just, you know, I was just a bit dazed with everything, you know. So I stayed with my mum and dad's, and I think within a day or so, because of the area I grew up in, I was living in at the time, and it was big news around the town. My dad felt that, you know, someone's going to try and burgle the house, you know. So we needed to get me goods out, you know, me valuable stuff. Yeah. So we went back round, and this was the point when I think it probably hit me. My dad, one of his mates, my brother-in-law, they all went in ahead of me. One of my dads, he's Peter Wiggins, his name. He's quite a tough old fella, grew up in the East End, and he just cried when he got in there. It was when he see the devastation in the house.
Yeah.
I turned up about 5 minutes later with my mum and my mother-in-law, and I just turned to my mum and I said, "Look, Mum," I said, "I don't know what we're going into." I said, "But I don't want all this cuddling stuff, like, you know what I mean?" I said, "I just, I don't know how I'm going to react, So you walked in, and there's just blood. There's blood up the walls. The carpets were just saturated, still wet with blood. The settees had blood on them, both from where I'd sort of tried getting through the living room. But the worst thing was the smell. Now, it'd only been a couple of days, but the blood had started to congeal in the house, and you've got to imagine it's gone through the carpets, into the underlays and the concrete, and it just stunk. And I'll never forget that smell. It was the worst part of it. Just that. It was just something about that smell, It's hard to describe what it was. It just weren't very nice. So at that point, there was no way I was going back to the house. I was never going. At that point, I was never going back. But 9 months later, I lived with my mum and dad, a wife and a 1-year-old, and sooner or later you got to get back to normal. And so we made the decision to move back to the house. And yeah, it weren't a good time of it. I've got to say, you are vulnerable. You do feel scared.
And again, how did that impact on your employment? I mean, how soon before you could, go back to work?
Well, the funny thing was at the time, at the actual time of the stabbing, I'd actually started a van job, a van driving job. Right. But on the Monday, I'd done my last day for one company, and I was starting a new job on the Tuesday morning. So on the Monday evening, I'd been over and picked my new van up to collect the keys and brought the van back. Yeah. And I was ready to start a new job the following day. So I had no job. The guy, I had nothing. So it was literally a case of then getting out and getting some work, and doing anything, van driving, bit of labouring, whatever it was. And then I got back into the sign trade again with the same company. They let me back for a little while.
Right, that's good. That's good.
But yeah, I couldn't tell you if it was weeks, months. I didn't work for quite a while. To be honest with you, Frank, at the time, I'd clearly, what we now know as depression, I'd slipped into that back then. Yeah. I'd never have owned up to it, not in a million years. It was, you're a bloke, you don't own up to depression.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
So, I was just sort of got into that low, and to be honest, I couldn't care if I worked or not. And anyway, I went to see a doctor. And he said to me, "Look, Darren," he said, "I've known you and your family for many, many years, Dr. Richards." He said, "Can I suggest you get back to work?" And I just thought he was having a laugh. I was like, "Don't take the piss, like, I said, "Why would I go work?" And he was like, "Listen," he said, you come from a family of grafters." He said, "It's the best thing to do." He said, "Even if it's 1 or 2 days a week, just go and do some work, And he was spot on. He was absolutely spot on, And it was long term. It was like, as I got into work then, it sort of put everything behind you. You've got, right, okay, then, look, I've moved on a bit now. But actually, clearly I hadn't, because of what happened some 15 years after, So, but it was literally then, listen, I had my moments. There was all sorts of stuff going on. But in the main, we sort of got back to normal, and you just then went to work, earned your money, paid your bills.
Were you nervous when you went out socially, Darren? Were you conscious of people around you?
No, I was probably a little bit, but I went to safe areas. Like we used to drink in a place called the Maypole in Harlow, which is a social club. It was a family type environment. So that was sort of my drinking hall back then, and it was a safe place to be. You're surrounded by people So and it was lucky, because I didn't, I used to drink in some right boxy pubs, around the town, but not regularly. That was my main place for drinking, So socially, I felt relatively secure because I was always in a busy environment. I clearly weren't going to go out walking the streets at night on my own. That weren't going to happen anymore. No. But so it was I can't remember at sort of the stages all this stuff happened. When I started going back out. But there was some real. I mean, I had no money. I hadn't worked. I had no money for a long time. I remember I had one Sunday. I actually wanted to go to the pub. And Wendy was saying to me, "Look, we've got no money. We've literally got not a bean. I was dealing with a mortgage company because I weren't paying my mortgage and things like that. There's a whole knock-on effect of everything that went on around us. And I stood in my mum and dad's conservatory, and I'm just like, I just want to go to the pub and have a couple of pints. And my mum and dad are going, well, look, we've got beer in the fridge, have a beer here. I don't want fucking beer here. I want to go to the pub. I want to go to the pub and have a pint. But I was skint. I was literally had nothing. And I turned around to my mum and I told her I wished I was dead. Which that moment in time sounds a bit stupid over a pint, but for me, it was like, that was it. Life had ended, it beat me at that point, and it's, I should never have said that to my mum.
Well, a simple thing, isn't it? It took a simple thing to emphasise, the magnitude of it all, I suppose.
Oh, absolutely. It was, and it was that period where I was probably at my worst because I didn't really care. I didn't care about, to be fair, I probably didn't care about anyone and not even myself, so, and thinking logically weren't part of the agenda. You weren't, nothing was, there was no logic to anything for me. So I was always looking. Like I said before, I've never been a fighter. I've never been a troublesome person. I've never been in trouble with the old Bill. And then all of a sudden, then I was looking for things. I then went into this period in my life where I thought I was invincible. So I mean, it sounds pathetic, but I'd drive along the street and I'd see a copper coming the other way, and I'd take my seatbelt off and go on, arrest me. How pathetic. It sounds stupid, but it's the sort of silly stuff I was doing, and I was just in a sort of a downward spiral for a long, long time, and Wendy, through all of this, the saving grace was eventually a couple of years after the stabbing, we had our second child, Shannon. So Wendy was in sort of bringing up the kid mode, so she had a distraction. Yeah. But, I mean, even now, 30, we've been married 31 years now, 35 together, without her, I wouldn't be here now. She rode all of that period, and then when I got back to work, I didn't start going to the pub too much. I was drinking heavily, quite often. I mean, I wouldn't say I was an alcoholic or anything like that, but I was really heavily into the booze. I couldn't. I'd pop up the pub on a Tuesday and that'd be 7 or 8 pint session. Thursday and a Friday was 10, 12, 14 pints. And every day was a party to me. And she's at home bringing up a couple of kids, on a shoestring, and I'm spending money I didn't have at the pub. But all I was doing was burying demons with a pint, basically. So, which many people have done. Many people have done. So, but then I just got into sort of normal life. Life then picked up. I changed. I went from job to job to job. Couldn't hold a job down. It was always someone else's fault while I left the job. I could never look at myself and say that was me. It was always someone else's fault. And I probably threw a couple of good jobs away because of it. And it was just because whenever things got a little bit tough, rather than facing up to it, I moved on. And that's how I was for many, many years. So, and then eventually, we think it was around 14, 15 years after. I couldn't tell you the exact sort of timescales, but I started getting myself sorted. We had, I was working, we was paying our bills, and things were going okay. Kids were growing up, and what the doctors say is that sort of freed up a bit of space in the old grey matter for the past to come up and kick me up the arse, basically. And I went into a massive bout of depression. And as I sit here now, I'll tell you that bout of depression was 1,000 times worse than the stabbing, like by a country mile. It's the worst thing, which is why I do what I do now, to try and help others. Because if I had a choice, stabbing or the depression after, I'd take the stabbing all day long, because it was nothing compared to the depression. It was, the stabbing happened and it was bad. As I said earlier, I wouldn't recommend it, but the depression was the bit that nearly sent me under big style. So Wendy, bless her, she'd always thought there was a little switch waiting to go off in me. That self-destruct button. She just felt it was always there under the surface. And we went out of her workmates one night. We was in a nightclub called Billie Jean's in Epping. 3 young Herberts come in and they stood at the bar, and one of them walked round the bar and he pushed into Wendy, just pushed her into a table, like wanting to start a bit of trouble in there. They could have done it to anybody. It had nothing to do with me whatsoever. But that was my moment. That little switch she'd been waiting for came down, And off I went. I was trying to batter this geezer. I tried putting a bottle in his throat. I just lost it. Bearing in mind, you're talking to someone who's not a fighter, you know. So I probably didn't even touch him. Do you know what I mean? I thought I was battering him. So, but Wendy had thought someone bumped into her, and I'd overreacted. You know, she didn't see it was a deliberate act by someone. Lucky enough, one of her workmates has seen exactly what I saw. So, but unfortunately, it was the moment that turned her against me. You know, it nearly cost me my marriage. You know, as a bitch, she hated me, absolutely hated me. It was, you know, I'd embarrassed her in front of her workmates. I then tried starting on the bouncers on the way out. I was just a lunatic, you know, and it was embarrassing for her. You know, it was horrendous time for her. That was the worst bit. And she said to me, "You've got to go and get yourself sorted." You know, bearing in mind, this is 15, 16 years after the attack. You know, this isn't a couple of months or, you know, a couple of years. It's a long time after, you know, and that's where it really got me. It got me at that point. But I was massively on a downward spiral then, and there was no getting out of it. You know, for me at the time, you know, I'd worked out, I was going to take my own life. I was going to end everything. I started working out where I knew that there was people in our lives that had suddenly go, hang on, Wendy's on her own, you know, it's a good-looking bird, and I started picking out fellas that I knew. Bearing in mind, these blokes haven't done nothing, right? And all of a sudden, I developed a hatred of them. I wanted to hurt them because of what they might be thinking, you know, about my demise. And it's bloody stupid, you know. It's stupid to think that's what the brain was doing, but that's what it was doing to me. It was, you know, there were certain people in our world, nice, normal, everyday fellas that I really hated, you know, and I couldn't trust them. So I then made a point of going to all these social events because I knew they would be there, so I could watch them and make sure they weren't doing anything. And it was the paranoia was kicked in, and it was making the situation worse. You know, the depression. I mean, you know, we've covered a lot of ground here, you know, in a short space of time.
Yeah.
But that's where I got to, and it was at that point I just needed to get it sorted, but I couldn't own up to it being a problem. You know, at the time, I didn't know I had a problem. As far as I was concerned, I was normal Darren, like, you know. But it weren't the case. I was in a terrible state, and you know.
What was the turning point for you then, Darren? Where did the transition begin?
Well, it was Boxing Day. Funny enough, Wendy's mum and dad have never been into Christmas Day so much, so we used to have our Christmases with them on Boxing Day. And Wendy's dad, he was getting on a bit. I mean, he's still going now, 83 years old as he is now. But back then, he was getting on a bit. And the girls went out into the kitchen. And I was sat at the dining table with him. And he'd had a bit of a cough and a cold for about 3 weeks. I mean, he didn't mention that now. But back then, it was all right. It was just a cough and a cold. But, and he just looked across the table at me. And he said to me, "They don't prepare you for this, Darren, when you get old." He said this sort of stuff. And I looked at him. When I look back on it, he was telling me if anything happened to him, at that point, I couldn't even look after myself. So I was going to look after his daughter and his grandchildren.
Yeah.
And that was my moment. You know, that was the bit where I was like, you know, I've been to the doctors. I've had me seen in the doctor's surgery where I made a right fool of myself. You know, but I had these tablets. They'd given me antidepressant tablets, but I weren't taking them. You know, bloody hell. You know, as far as I was concerned, no, I mean, that's for the weak. Yeah. You know, that weren't me. You know, I was tougher than that. But I just sat there, looked across the table, and I realised, you know, I couldn't actually even keep an eye on myself. So how am I meant to look after his daughter? You know, if anything happened to him. So it's literally the following morning, I woke up and I took the first tablet. You know, and I cried, sat there, cried my eyes out. You know, when Wendy sat with me, we took the tablet because I'd been beaten. At this point, it had beaten me because I had to concede I needed the tablets. You know, and that way I'd lost the battle against depression. I'd lost the battle against the bastards who stabbed us. You know, for me, I'd lost. You know, and it was heartbreaking. But then all of a sudden, there was a little moment where I suddenly thought, actually, bearing in mind these tablets take about 2 months to really kick in. You know, you've got to take them every day. And I suddenly thought, I've had the first tablet. I feel better. You know, and it was a psychological thing, you know, and before you know it, the second morning when I woke up to take the next tablet, it was like a little celebration. It was like, right, actually, I'm on the road to recovery here. You know, and it was a real turning point. So that moment sitting opposite her dad was, you know, I'd had a phone call from one of my mates, Eamon, and I knew him quite well. And he'd said to me at the time, he said, look, Darren, he said, because he'd been through depression, I didn't know, by the way, but he could see the signs in me. And he phoned me up one day and he said, get yourself in the doctors, Darren. He said, they'll give you tablets. He said, you take them, he went to me. He said, you make sure you take them. I didn't believe him. You know, I took no notice of him, but then I realised he knew, he see it in me. And I think my father-in-law had seen it in me as well, like, you know, so, and that was pretty much the first step to recovery, you know, getting back on track.
So, of course, you've got to get yourself right first, you know, before you can go on and help other people. What stage did you feel that you wanted to do that you wanted to share your story with people, your horrible experience? Or experiences, come to think of it, because there was all the knock-on effects.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, for me, the turning point was my mum for years. I'd been self-employed. I'd run businesses. At one point, I had 3 or 4 businesses on the go. You know, I'd done all sorts, you know, ducking and diving here and there, and done what I needed to do to earn a living. I'd had massive highs. I'd had massive lows. I made a lot of money. I lost a lot more money in various business ventures. And then it just got to the stage, my mum had been saying for years and years, why don't you get yourself a proper job? And I'm like, they don't exist, you know. So, but she said, one of those where you go 9 to 5, like. And anyway, by luck, I discovered Hilti, where I work now, who make the power tools. And I went through the interview process and got the job. And it's that point that things turned for me, because suddenly I was working in an environment with nice people, you know, with good people, a good employer. And they gave me the freedom to be me. I was earning a reasonable wage, and it just freed up so much of my mind, which then allowed me to write the book. Yeah. And they supported all the way through that. They supported the journey writing the book. And, you know, the book was probably one of the turning points for me. It was, you know, it took me 12 months to write. You know, I shed a tear or two. And there's days when Wendy come in, she's like, seeing me typing, sobbing my heart out, going, you know, I think you need to stop, like, you know. But I'm like, no, I'm enjoying myself. And it was a tough ride, you know, because what the book is my story exactly.
Well, you're stripping yourself back, aren't you, Darren? You're stripping yourself back. You know, you're exposing your private life, you know, your own life, your family life, and once you've done it, once you've put it in print, you can't go back on it. And
no, you know yourself, Frank. You know, with the books, you know, it's
I've bottled it a few times, you know, and I think it was partly I knew that other people wanted me to do it, probably far more than I wanted to actually do it. So it was only the constant, how you getting on with the book, because people were interested to read it, and of course my attitude was, well, it was all right with you, mate. It ain't about you, is it? It's about me. So I can appreciate what you did there. You know?
Well, it was I done my book launch, and I'm not going to give you the fella's name, but a story come out of my book launch where I'd helped someone out of work. You know, I'd helped them out through getting through their early stages, through their first 6 months, 9 months. Yeah. And anyway, as a gesture, like, you know, he come to my book launch for me. He came up, drove a long way. And I said, blimey, mate, like, you know, you didn't have to come up. He said, no. He said, you've helped me in the past. He said, I want to help you. And this was on a Thursday night. It was on April the 12th. And anyway, book launch went really well. Off we went. On the Saturday morning, he started texting me. And he said, Darren, I've read your book already. Like, I thought, blimey, he's only had it a day and he's ready. So he said to me, look, he said, I need to tell you a story. He said, I was beaten as a child. He said, my mum was beaten by my dad. He said, and I've had bouts of depression and anger in my adult life. He said, but I've read your book. He said, I'm going to go and get myself sorted. You know, it was a long conversation over text and things like that. I was really proud. You know, I was like, hang on a minute, my story's helped someone here, helped them make the next step. So I was really proud of that. And that started turning me into the person I wanted to become, you know, which was helping others. Yeah. Sometime later, I met up with him again, and he said, I need to tell you my real story, like, you know. I said, no, you told me, mate. He said, no. He said, I told you I was beaten by my dad. My mum was beaten. I said, yeah. He said, well, your book launch was on this day. And he remembered the date. And I thought, to be fair, you know yourself, if you launch a book, it's probably only that date's important to you and no one else. You know, no one's really going to remember it. And he gave me the date, and he said that was the Thursday night. And he said, I've got to tell you, Darren, he said, I had my suicide notes written to my wife and kids. He said, and I had a stash of pills, stash of drink, and I was taking my own life that weekend. He said, and I read your book, and I didn't, you know. And for me, if I'd done nothing else in my life, you know, he will tell you, if he was on here now, he would tell you I saved his life. You know, I think I was the prompt that helped him do it, but, you know, who knows? I don't know, you know, but it was probably one of the proudest.
It's got to be a better ending. It's got to be a better. I'm going to go into some of your dark humour now. It's got to be a better ending than he read your book and him felt like killing himself. So I'm glad we got it. And both notes. Yeah, I'm glad we got it the right way around. Well, that's something to be proud of, isn't it? That is something.
Well,
I mean, you didn't do it. Consider you didn't do it for that reason. It's not like
not at all.
It's premeditated. You've gone out and said, look, you know, I'm an attention seeker and I want all these accolades. For the fact that a bloke can just read that book and have that impact on him. I mean, that's...
Well, it happened many times after that, Frank. It was like people were, you know, coming out of the woodwork at me. And what happened was there was a negative side of this as well, because I started getting people coming to me with their stories.
Yeah.
Right? And what I then wanted to do was help them. Right? Well, you can't help everybody.
No.
So what I then started to do, I ended up going back into a bit of a lull for a while because I was taking on everyone else's problems.
Yep.
And once again, Wendy was there. She said, listen, you've got to stop this. You know, you've got to do what you do, put it out there to help. You can't keep taking it back on. There's too many to help, like, you know.
Yeah.
So I had to restructure what I do. And it was then I started to get around, you know, speaking to people, started doing the guest speaking, which I really, really enjoy. You know, I didn't think anyone would want me speaking, you know, how I talk. I didn't think anyone would want me standing up in front of a crowd saying they've given them my story. Do you know what I mean? But they do. Because, as the book says, you know, let's skip to the good bits. That's what I'd done. I'd gone through the dark days, come out the other end. And I think people were using that as their inspiration to go and change their world. To go, you know, it don't matter what backgrounds you come from. It don't matter what trauma you've gone through. You know, whether it be a car crash, whether it be an attack, you know, a house fire, whatever the things you've gone through in life. Suddenly people were looking at my story thinking, well, hang on, I can change this. I can make good out of this.
Yep.
You know, and that's where I wanted to be. You know, and Ben Spanner, you mentioned earlier with the Change Your Knife campaign, Change Your Life, Put Down Your Knife, was a little door opening of something I really wanted, I needed, and I passionately believed in it. I even said to Ben at the time, I said, listen, I don't know how much I can help, mate. You know, I said, I'll put my name to it. You know, we had 140 members on the Facebook page at the time. You know, 140. When he messaged me out of the blue, he said, all I want you to do is put a T-shirt on, like, you know, tell the world your story. And all of a sudden we went to 1,000 members, 2,000 members, you know, with the help of people like Terry Ellis, Ray Bishop, things like that. You know, and all of a sudden it was growing. And, you know, what I found then was I was meeting more and more people and not realising the help I was giving them. Because I weren't doing it as a deliberate act. I was just sharing what I had, like, you know. And the one thing I always tell people, I'm not a counsellor, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, you know, I've got no qualifications. I'm just a bloke who lived the life I lived. And if I can share that story and help other people to come out of whatever dark days they're in, then as far as I'm concerned, that's all the qualifications I needed. So,
well, Darren, I make no bones about it. You know, the philosophy of, you know, of frankly speaking, is that we do want, you know, to give an opportunity to real and inspiring people to come on and share their message, you know, and their experiences, because it is real. You know, it's although you've clearly written a book, it's not a counsellor, it's not a psychologist who's read case studies out of a book. You know, I'd rather talk to people who've actually had those experiences and can speak firsthand. You know, and you've done that. You know, you've done that today. You've done it very. You can tell you've been doing. You can tell you've been doing some, you know, speaking, because you are comfortable. You are comfortable in telling your story and your experiences.
I mean, going back to what we were talking about, you know, it was for me, the helping of others was where I started to get my greatest reward from. Yeah. You know, the writing of the book. I mean, I don't know about you, Frank. I ended up giving away more books than I sold. You know, I didn't make any money out of it. You know, it cost me money, but it was still rewarding in other areas, you know, and for me then, it just turned. Everything sort of turned. I started enjoying that side of things, you know, helping the other people out.
Yeah.
Wendy sort of shielding me from taking on too much. And it's where I've got to now, where I've started writing a second book, by the way.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
So the book's going to be called Why Me? And it's why me in a negative as well as a positive. You know, why me? Why was it my door they knocked on? You know, that's the negative side of it.
Yeah.
But why me is more now about what I do now than the past.
Yeah.
Why me? Well, because I can, because I want to. That's why me.
Yeah.
You know, so the book is very much focused around the impact it had on the greater community around me, i.e. my wife, my children as they were growing up, my mum and dad's long-term effect. You know, even the copper that investigated my case, you know, he was CID at the time, and it shaped his career. You know, he basically then he enjoyed my case so much, he went on to serious crimes in the Met. He then went on to serious organised crime. You know, and it had an impact on him as well. You know, in a positive way. And there's so many good things have come out of it.
Yeah.
That, you know, you don't need to turn back time now. You know, you don't need to go back and go, well, actually, don't open the door. You know, if you could turn back time, what would you do? You know what? I probably wouldn't. You know, yes, I wouldn't have done some of the silly things I've done when I was going through the depression with Wendy. You know, I wouldn't have kept breaking her heart all the time. But, you know, in the main, I wouldn't change it now. You know, I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I mean, you know, hopefully once all this clears, we can get back to the guest speaking side of things. You know, where we getting into schools, talking to them about depression, you know, mental health. My main focus is going to be working with blokes in the construction industry and the tool hire industry, which I work in. So, you know, you've got to try and channel your energies into a specific type of audience before you grow it. And I know, you know, there's blokes out there 45 years old and above struggle. You know, life changes, you know, they get these lonely feelings, they get this feeling of surplus to requirements because the kids are grown up, the wife's doing all right at work, you know, just normal life, and suddenly you don't feel important enough, you know, and in a lot of people that then sends people into depression, and it's rife in that sort of age group in the construction industries. It's rife, so I want to start helping there where I can, you know, if I can. So I'm a massive believer. They talk about this 1 in 4 people suffering with mental health issues, you know, and it is. I think it's far greater than that, but that's the number they band around all the time. Yeah. You know, I'm not some sort of statistician. I don't know all the figures, but for me, if there's 1 in 4 people suffering, that means there's 3 in 4 people who can look out for the 1 in 4. And they're the people I want to get to. You know, I want to tell them the signs that went through me. I know what the signs are. So keep an eye on your workmates. Keep an eye on your family. You know, and if you spot a change in people, ask them. And don't be frightened to ask. You know, you're not there to fix it. Ask them, are they all right? When they say yeah, ask them again. And then ask them again. You know what? Because one day, these people might just go, you know what? No, I'm not all right. You know, and that saves lives. That really, really saves lives. And it's so 3 in 4 people, you know, just have the confidence to ask someone, are they feeling all right? Because you just never know what other people are going through.
I will say this, Dan, don't forget, as your wife's pointed out on a number of occasions as well, don't forget to leave a little bit of time for yourself as well, you know.
Massively now, mate, this is one of the things now with everything we're doing. You know, I threw it all away. This January, just gone, I said, I'm not doing another book, I'm not doing the YouTube channel, I'm not doing any more guest speaking, I'm just stopping everything, you know. I think the whole lockdown had got to me a little bit. I had the COVID, which knocked me sideways for a bit, and I sort of lost the will with everything all of a sudden. And then that little spark had gone, that little fire in my belly that I had, and she spotted it again, and she was like, listen, you need to be doing this. This is what makes you tick. You know, so once again, I delayed with it, and, you know, I went a little bit quiet with social media and everything I was doing. And then I thought, no, this is what I enjoy doing. I do love getting out there and helping people, you know. And listen, I ain't going to make money out of it, you know. I mean, listen, if you do, brilliant, you know, why not? You know, if you're helping people, but ultimately the reward is there. You know, and someone phoning you up saying you saved me life, that's reward enough. You ain't going to get enough money that makes that feeling like that, you know. So yeah,
well, it's a bit like I remember when I was years ago, and I was a dispatch manager. We had there was young messengers, and young fellas learning about the digital print trade and so on. And I used to say to them, you can do better than this. You've got to leave here. You've got your whole lives ahead of you, and so on. And it's nice now because if I'm with my wife and we occasionally bump into someone, and these young fellas are married now.
Yeah.
They've got a couple of kids, buying their own home, and they could have gotten a lot of bother, and and they'll turn around and say, "Thanks, Frank. Thanks for that, mate. Thanks for them little talks you used to give me and that." And you can't buy that, can you? You can't. You can't buy the fact you give someone a little bit of advice, a little bit of time, of your personal time, and they've listened. And I don't listen to myself most of the bloody time. So perhaps they can give me a talking to, Darren.
I think we need to take some of our own advice sometimes, mate, don't we?
Exactly.
We don't.
Darren, can you mention before we wrap it up? Do you want to mention the Barber Chair?
Yes, mate. Yeah, if you don't mind. So we're going to start filming in the end of August, beginning of September. I came up with the idea a couple of years ago. As I think I spoke to you many times about it before. Where back in the day, in the olden days, men used to go to their barbers and chat to their barber while he's having their hair cut and say, the wife don't understand me, and historically that's what used to happen. And even in modern days, some famous footballers have been to their barbers, and through their barbers, they started talking through their problems. Yeah. So I came up with a concept called the Barber Chair. And we started originally in our local barber shop where I've been going, don't know why though, but I've been going there 40 years. But so the idea was to get inspirational men into the barber chair, talk through their stories. And there's only 3 criteria. If you want to come and sit in the barber chair to be interviewed, there's three criteria you've got to fill. One of them is you've got to have a story to tell, something that's interesting that attracts the imagination a little bit. People want to listen to it. Second part is it's got to have some sort of connection with mental health, positive or negative. There's got to be a connection there with mental health. Yeah. But third and most importantly is what are you doing now to inspire other people? As you mentioned earlier, when we were talking, you can go and get a whole manner of people in to be interviewed, and they got incredible stories, fantastic stories. But what are they doing now to bring about changing other people and help other people? And that's what I want to do, is help as many as we can through the barber chair. And like I say, so there's nothing on there at the moment other than a bit of a trailer and a couple of videos of me. And hopefully once we get the edited version of this as well. It's a great concept, mate. I have to say, it's a great concept, and and a great opportunity to get people to share their experiences as well in a very unique way of doing it, but a nostalgic way, but quite a nostalgic way as well. Yeah, it's got a little story behind itself, Yeah, exactly. Which is nice, but it's ultimately it's doing good with it. I want to keep it upbeat. I want to keep it fun. Mental health can be a lot of doom and gloom. And it's a dark side of life. But there's still a lot of good that can come out of it. People that have come out the other end. And listen, hopefully we can save lives because of it. And that's the plan behind it. Is keep it upbeat, keep it positive. I sat around one day up in Scotland having breakfast, in a hotel with 3 mates, and they started talking amongst themselves. They started talking about their medication. Mine normally would be blood pressure, and theirs was medication I'd never heard of. But they all had some degree of mental health problems, or concerns. Well, I wouldn't say I sat there being smug. But there might have been an unconscious element of me going, well, I'm all right. Yeah. I'm all right. But not so long afterwards, I kind of did start to question myself and say, am I all right? Am I all right? Is it because I listen to other people's problems? I don't question my own or potential problems and so on. So even in that sense, it can be therapeutic. And hopefully that will be for you as well. You're going to continue to do so much good. I mean, I don't think they talk this American phrase of getting closure and things like that. If you've had a trauma in life, but sometimes for me, no one's ever been called for what happened to me. No one was ever even interviewed. Really, it's just one of those things, and I can't keep harping on that to myself about what should have been and what could have been. At some point, I've got to create my own closure. You know, make it say, listen, that's the line in the sand. That was then. Use it to my advantage now. You know, I haven't got to bin it and pretend it never happened, but you know, use it to help other people, which is what I'm about now. And like I said earlier, it gives me my greatest reward. So, yeah, but you do question yourself. You know, I still have my moments. You know, where you know where you question, are you doing things right? You know, and it brings back those bad memories. But now I'm aware of the signs. You know, I'm now aware of, hang on, I'm slipping down a little bit here. I need to bring myself back into reality again, you know. So if I can spot them in me, other people should be able to spot them in other people as well. Yeah.
Well, Darren, clearly on a personal level, I wish you all the best anyway.
Thank you very much.
And we'll clearly keep in touch. And I'm sure everybody that watches this is going to wish you all the best as well. And if anybody can assist Darren in whatever he's doing, whether it's stuff he's done in the past or what he's now going to start to do, if anybody, if people want to contact us or if they want to contact Darren, if you want to leave any details of us, Darren, we'll certainly make that available. What I'd like to do is just finish off again. Thanks very much for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your experience and your knowledge. Thanks for sharing your knowledge, because that's what people do need. They need a little bit of knowledge as well. And again, we always say we want real people on the show and people that inspire people, and you certainly fitted that criteria today, Darren, and we appreciate that. So I'm just going to finish up again. I'd like to thank everybody that tunes in and watches the podcast. It is very much appreciated. But what I'd like to do now is I'd just like to leave a message with the viewers as to how we started the podcast today and bearing Darren's story, taking Darren's story into account. Don't be the man that's waiting for the knock. Don't be the man that's standing in the dock. Don't be the man that's waiting for the key to turn in the lock. Don't be the man in the cell or down the block. Be that man that knows he can be someone. Be that man whose mother is proud to call him son. Be that man who looks back on life and know that he's won. Be that man that does what needs to be done. Change your life, put down your knife.